The kids growing up gaming on tablets are going to have all the internet addiction without any of the computer skills. But their thumbs will be deadly. Although with a keyboard, all your fingers are deadly, but you will make your girlfriend happy by your finger muscles. You thumb your girl. All thumbs. As a teacher, I had previously become accustomed to assuming that kids I teach know how to maneuver internet sites and basic computer skills. Definitely not the case. I learned last year not to do this anymore, and just like anything, some catch on fast, some don't. The ones who don't tend to do poorly in other areas. And it really has nothing to do with being born in a more technologically savvy time. I was definitely guilty of assuming too much. My mother talked about the same thing. She worked at a very expensive private school that was Prec 8th grade. She talked how she would have to teach Prec the basics of the mouse and to maneuver it around. Then came a point where all children knew how to do basics and she could start teaching more advanced stuff earlier. Her last few years, 2015 to 16, that some once again never saw a computer before, and almost all would try touchscreen. My 5-year-old kept assuming my TV and computer monitor were touch screens. At least there's precedent for this. When I was 5, I just touched the TV because I was ducking stupid. I used to touch the old tube TV we had for a ridiculously long time because it gave a little static shock. I did that too, but I'd also sniff the screen because it smelled weird, haha. My kids are 11 and 8, and they grew up using iPads. Because of my ex-wife, and their school used iPads for the 2 first grades and then switched to Chromebooks. They were indeed very influenced by this and had trouble grasping a lot of things like apps vs programs, file handling and egg. What a browser is. That the internet is not Safari. That iPads are tablets. And not just iPads, like a universal term for tablets. But then my eldest kid caught interest in Star Stable, a PC-only game. And now both of them have Lenovo laptops, and they are rapidly gaining computer skills. For instance, my eldest kid figured out how to set up a private Discord channel with permissions and all of that using Google and YouTube. Keep in mind that English is not her first language. My friend is a middle school teacher and has to deal with this all the time. She has to teach basic computer structure, file folders, save vs save as, etc. to them so they can do their homework. I mean, they gotta learn at some point, lol. The only reason most kids in my middle school knew how to do that was because we learned it in primary school, not because everyone used the PC so much at home. A lot of kids had no interest in technology beyond using an application back then either. Yep, I'm an early millennial, and I took typing classes as a kid. I did too, but I'm a late millennial. I remember lots of people my age did. There were also a lot of summer camp after school club type activities centered around learning to use computers, internet safety classes, and so on. I mean, we who grew up with newer computers also didn't get part of the computer skills people who grew up with, say, Commodore 64s and such had. Yeah, as always, it's just classic juvenilia. Thanks of source. Like, as always, Reddit seems to have some sort of superiority complex. Our generation was the ones who did it right. And yet, they undoubtedly grew up with. Kids growing up on computers are going to have short-sightedness but none of the writing skills. And then they are going on about how at 12, I was overclocking my PC and running Minecraft servers. Okay, so Minecraft was released in 2009. That's a generous 23 for the commenter. I can definitively say that this person would have grown up in a generation where tablets and smartphones were commonplace, or at least is close enough in age to be in the same generation. Most everyone on this website are tech or politics nerds, and then they get a superiority complex. They know more about PCs. It is so interesting seeing this happen. It was very predictable that millennials would start to look down on Gen Z and whatever the newer generation is called. It was inevitable that millennials would get shit on the same way we shit on older generations. And we are handling it about as well as baby boomers did. As you pointed out, this post is no different than the things older generations said about us. We just hate the 18 to 25-year-old age range. Gen X was blamed for not purchasing CDs during that age range. Millennials were blamed for pirating, poor work ethic, and being butthurt about college debt during that age range. Sounds like Gen Z is being blamed for not understanding computers during that age range. As a side note, I don't know that good work ethic for that age range is necessarily the norm. Some people of that age range have it. Some have not grasped it yet. No one is blamed for anything. It's half a bunch of rage addicts looking for a fight, and half people overreacting to articles reporting on demographic trends. Most adults who use a computer every day have no idea what it's doing. They are equally screwed if something is not right and they get an error message with no other talent than switching it off and restarting. So I don't see this as a problem. Most of humanity is just an end user that will never investigate the how of computers. In my experience, the how is not that important. It's more important to know how to Google problems and follow simple instructions. I can tell you from my experience in it that 95% of all computer users don't know how to do that either. If the computer shows an error message or doesn't work right, they collapse from panic and stress and start sobbing on the floor yelling at it how it's somehow their fault. And the problem ends up being having the wrong audio device selected, wireless mouse batteries being empty, them not following the literal instructions on the screen. Equals most people know how a computer works until it's more complicated than opening Facebook or Microsoft Word. Network support engineer can attest, still keeps us in our jobs, doesn't it? Sad thing is, there's also no way around it. I can wish to be a responsible parent and not give my kids phones and tablets, but then they will be left behind compared to other kids and will have problems adapting socially, which is even worse. It's just sad. Thanks for acknowledging this. Programmers of the future are going to design things based on what they're familiar with and what most users will be familiar with. Denying your kid the skills and experience they'll need to interface with the future won't do them any good. As if one day we'll all go back to using BASIC on a VIC-20. Great. Sounds like the mobilification of desktop sites /UIS is just going to get worse and worse. Never in the history of computers have interfaces gotten worse and worse. The people used to them just get older and older. Edit. Things get worse then better all the time, but really do they get worse and worse? I guess this is possible, but it's pretty accepted that the settings application in Windows 10 is way worse than accessing the same settings via control panel. Again, is that because us computer people have just been using the old way for 20 years, but the new apps do objectively offer less information and seems harder to get to any sort of advanced settings through it? It's a matter of perspective. Op sounds like someone who never had to configure TCP/IP and edit the registry to get their shitty dial-up to work. Now get off my lawn. Who needs dial-up when you pirated games and had to go to extreme lengths to get multiplayer? Doubtful as they won't have the mentality of hating new technology. Once that hurdle is cleared, it really isn't that hard to learn and understand any tech. Pretty much any tech support I've done with repeated visits is due to the user not wanting to learn. These kids will Google a tutorial or and answer so. Doubtful they will be worse than someone 50 plus coming up to me claiming their phone doesn't work and all they had to do was turn it on. Due to user not wanting to learn, yeah. This, when my dad wanted to do something on the PC, he asked me to help. Instead of doing it for him, I tried to guide him towards the answer, telling him where to click, asking along the way what is it he just did, etc. So he might remember it in the future and won't need my help. After a few minutes he literally went apeshit and started shouting, like why am I so useless and I never help with anything. After trying to explain that I wanted to teach him, not just do it for him, he literally said he doesn't want to learn it, he wants me to do it every time instead. My dad is totally opposite, took out pen and paper and wrote down the exact text labels he needs to interact with. He doesn't speak English. Now he's downloading YouTube videos, transcoding them to proper MP3s his car supports. He's kicking its ass. In the car world, it's even worse. You get old dudes dead set on only using carbs and refusing to even learn about EFI. And you get the ones who have kept learning their entire lives and are doing some mad EFI tuning stuff at 60. Those dudes are awesome. I always just assumed people my age, 28, would have basic computer skills. Turns out, half of them hardly know how to restart a computer, let alone Google a solution to any problem they have. It's the same for my classmates, 20, but they might just be dumb. These kids growing up modern desktops are going to have no soldering or diagnosis skills. These kids growing up with 8-bit computers are going to have no typewriter skills. They can just undo every mistake. These kids growing up with typewriters are going to have no handwriting skills. These handwriters are going to have no chiseling skills. Yeah, I always surprise myself with how good my soldering is. I say that, but I burned myself last week and can see it on my hand still. Yeah, soldering nice and hard. Soldering nicely. That's the challenge. My soldering is ugly AF. Edit. Thanks for the tips, guys. I will keep them in mind the next time I need to solder. Use flux. This is already a thing. As a 12-year-old I knew the basics of installing Windows, formatting the computer and whatnot. My nephews who are that age now barely know how to install Fortnite on their PC. Just going to add this, you guys who don't agree, don't be mad 10 years from now when your kids can barely read a book or focus on something for 5 minutes other than the next round of Fortnite. You sound exactly like the parents who are against homework because the work should be done at school, while at the same time not teaching your kids to behave in schools or even sit down during class. Hence no work being done at school or at home. You are hurting your kids more than you realize. Enjoy this shit show. At 12 I was learning how to restore my PC to an earlier date, to remove viruses that I got from LimeWire. Learning by doing. Learning by undoing. I think 99% of the things I picked up as a kid was just fixing things I had screwed up. I'm in this Reddit comment and I don't like it. A lot of the same kids are now making videos for YouTube or streaming, so understand how editing, video and sound software works, while also making animations for intros. Also, playing games never taught me about how to use a PC. I never got one till I was 10, but played mainly console till I was 16, when I switched to PC. Edit. I get everyone's concern, but I feel the kids that still want to learn or something piques their interest in it will undoubtedly pick up the skills we all learned while PC gaming in the 90s and early 2000s. When did you start playing PC games? I got my first PC in the mid 90s. Back then you had to know a reasonable bit about general computing just to get the games to run. Then throw in the very limited modding available at the time and the extra steps needed to run pirated games. I miss the days when your computer would do the equivalent of telling you to git good. You mean crackle mayo? I felt like a hacker when I managed to run my Sims with that after months of getting insert disk error. A new world of gaming opened up right before my eyes right there. A whole games I couldn't make it work is now playable, and I also started tinkering with files, and years later I graduated a degree in computer science because of that sense of satisfaction from that crack program. Can't have an insert disk error if you pirate the ISO and open it in Daemon Tools. They will adapt. They, being software companies, they'll adapt to their market. The fact that it's a tablet is probably the less important factor in this than the fact that it's an iPad, a closed system with nowhere near the same abilities to do work as a general purpose PC. It's basic computer literacy, and anyone thinking this is a boomer vs zoomer thing is grossly simplifying. I really hope Ubuntu Touch, GNOME 3 and even Windows continue to grow in the tablet market. Do you really think the average non-iPad user is going to use a tablet for anything besides the same handful of apps an iPad user uses? Not op, but no, my mother and siblings who have Samsung devices don't even know what a browser is, nor the difference between mobile data and Wi-Fi. I don't think Android would be much different in this regard, unless the kid is really inquisitive. We, teachers, see this a lot right now in the classrooms. Our kids, JH level, received laptops to use for home learning, and our first several assignments were how to perform basic functions on the computer like opening, saving, and closing a document as well as turning the computer off and restarting it. It's bizarre to see basic computer skills being lost again. I remember having a class like this in 9th grade, and every day I wanted to scream. I think you need to define computer skills. For example, sending a email looking for information is all stuff that can easily be done on a tablet. Probably along the lines of file structure, basic troubleshooting and basic maintenance. Granted, you have that on a tablet, but the experience isn't the same. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.